right, welcome back to Talking Story, everybody. Welcome to the channel, and especially welcome a friend of mine that I have lost touch with, and I am so happy to reconnect with when I saw this on my bookshelves on my local bookstore and reached out to him, and he was so kind and generous to spend some time with me. Mr. David Liss, award-winning, amazing author, Mr. David Liss. Thank you so much, my friend, for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. It's great to reconnect, and appreciate you wanting to take some time to talk about my stuff.
Oh, you know what? It's so funny to me. I can't believe I didn't have you on sooner. But when this just smacked me in the face, man, you have come all the way over. And I mean, we're going to get through all of it. We're going to get through all of it because I've been reading your stuff. I've been with you for a while. Through so many things, but I don't want to jump the gun. But when I read this, I was like so over the moon happy because I can just imagine the fun David Liss had putting this on paper. That's the way it struck me anyway.
Yeah, I did enjoy writing it. It was a good time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. We always start this with kind of the same question to get everything rolling, to get started off. And I always like to ask the guest, when did it first hit you? It's kind of like a calling always. When did you know? What happened to you? Were you little young David Liss when you knew I want to be a storyteller. This is what I want to do?
It is one of those things that I think has always been with me. I mean, some of my earliest memories are of, trying to write stories like in the second grade.
Oh, wow.
I've always loved narrative in all forms. And I've always wanted to produce my own stories. So, there was no, sort of, moment in adulthood when it suddenly struck me. It was always there.
It was always there.
Even when I was doing other things and had given up on the prospect of becoming a writer, I would still learn something new or encounter an interesting person or just have a kind of an interesting idea. And I'd always think about this stuff in terms of how it could be made into a story. So it's really, it's just kind of how I'm wired.
Yeah. So from second grade, it hit you. And then later on, you gave up. What made you think of giving it up for a moment there?
After I graduated from college, I tried writing a novel. And it turned out writing a novel is hard. And
yes.
And at that time, I really just didn't have the experience or the maturity or just the sense of how things really work to understand that writing is craft. That
Mm-hmm.
we have this idea in our culture that certain kinds of things should be effortless, right? Like you should be a genius. That if you have to work at your writing or your painting or your sculpture, if you have to really think about it, then you're not really gifted. And that it's this kind of myth of effortlessness that I bought into, and I really struggled. I didn't know how to do it. Of course, I didn't know how to do it. I'd never done it, and there are a lot of technical aspects to it. And so I said, this is hard, I can't do it. And I went on to do other things. And I eventually ended up in graduate school and was working on a dissertation on 18th century British literature. And at that point, I wanted to take another crack at writing a novel. And at that point, I did have more experience. And I'd already learned that there were lots of things I didn't know how to do, that I could learn how to do them and then do them. And I was hoping that writing a novel would be one of those things, and it turned out to be.
Wow. So that's interesting to me because coming from, my own artistic journey and stuff, that is kind of something that is put into our heads, right? Like only the truly gifted, the truly talented. It's almost like winning the lottery. Your numbers have to come up to get an opportunity or a chance to make your passion, your job in the artistic world, right? So you do have that idea of, oh man, if I'm not just struck by lightning or gifted in some grand fashion, it must not be for me. So I totally get you falling into that trap. But then on the other side, I find it so interesting that when you started studying history of literature, everything started breaking loose for you, because that is such a major part of your work through the years.
Well, for me, I think the difference was in graduate school, I really had to, you get together in a kind of very selective graduate program, and everybody there is used to being the smartest person in the room. And when you're in that room, somebody's got to be the stupidest person. and it always felt like it was me.
That can't be true, David. That can't be true.
But, I really had to learn how to grapple with things that were just really difficult for me, to make it through texts and literary theory and learn concepts, all of which just required this Herculean effort that I'd never had to apply toward anything before. And so I kind of extrapolated that I could apply the same skills that I'd learned to overcome those intellectual obstacles to figuring out how to write a novel. And I went about it very programmatically. I read a bunch of novels and just tried to figure out structurally what was going on, what was happening, if I read a scene that I liked or didn't like, or if I connected with a character, or if I hated a character, or if I didn't give a crap about a character. I tried to figure out what's happening behind the curtains to produce these effects. And I essentially just tried to reverse engineer everything I read, both good and bad, to figure out why it was working or not working.
So what you found, and what so many people find, I think, that have success in the arts, is it's like the hard work of craft, of starting to put all those tools in that box that you can pull out time after time, that you learn how to use and that they work to tell a story, right? So it's interesting that the arduous academic journey you had brought you back around to that. Was there a time when you thought maybe you would just teach, or you would just
I was on the track to become a professor, and I just realized it wasn't something I wanted to do. I wasn't looking forward to the idea of finishing and becoming a professor. It just kind of filled me with dread. I knew I couldn't make it through faculty meetings. I knew that was more than I could handle.
Oh, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign.
Yeah. I always say that when my wife applied for jobs, she was one of, like, every job she applied to she was one of 800 people applying for a single job. And I would lie in bed awake at night, worried that I would get a job. So that's when you know you may be on the wrong track.
Oh yeah, you're definitely on the wrong track. So going all the way back again. Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No, please.
Okay. So going all the way back, you were writing stories in second grade. This was always with you, always a part of you. You were always enamored with narrative. What were some of the earliest inspirations? What are some of the first things that you remember reading that stuck with you, that kind of started forming that love of narrative as far as inspirations go?
I think a big book for me and a lot of people of our generation was A Wrinkle in Time. That was one of the first things I remember really just kind of making me feel like there are stories and there are stories, and it kind of just blew my mind. And I remember being a little kid and just wandering into a room one day where my stepbrother was watching Star Trek, and I became completely enchanted with that. It was, in fact, I remember it was the episode where Kirk fights the Gorn, and so I walk in and he's fighting this guy in a rubber lizard suit, and I thought, everything should be this.
Everything should be this, and it's so that episode, that is so great. When he has to find the sulfur and make the cannon. So ridiculous. But if you catch that at the right age, man, your life has changed, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
You are in. That's it. That if I remember running home from school so I could catch the beginning, because it was reruns after school for me of Star Trek and Captain Kirk and Spock. And it's like I remember running home to make it, to catch the beginning,
And stuff like that was so precious then because there was so little of it. I mean, we really... we live in this golden age of science fiction on television right now, and people just, younger people don't realize how it just did not used to be this way.
And we live in this age where everything is immediate. You can stream anything at any time, and that feeling of, if I don't run home, I don't catch I don't catch the beginning. I'm lost. I don't know exactly what's going on, or those special movies. I do remember Wrinkle in Time, reading that as a young person, and it is one of those stories. It operated differently, didn't it? It was like a fever dream. It made me think.
Exactly.
It
was bizarre.
Right. Things are possible in books I hadn't thought are possible, because before it was so, there's an arc to a narrative, and everything I had read up to that point followed so structurally that arc. And that was one of those that made me just blew my hair back, because it was like, this doesn't work at all the way everything else I've read has worked.
Yeah, and from there I went on to I read a lot of the science fiction classics. I read Dune pretty young. I read when I was in middle school. I remember reading books by Stephen R. Donaldson. I don't know if you know him, but
Lord Spalsbane, yeah.
Yeah, weirdly, that was the first book represented by his agent, who later became my agent. So, it was just very weird for me to, catch this guy and work with him toward the end of his career, when like stuff he'd been representing at the beginning of his career was just real.
Was that like a total pinch you moment? Like, it was
kind of crazy. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a wake up call. Like, oh my God, I might be able to do this.
It was, it was very cool. And you start to see yourself as being part of this community. Like, I think before I started writing novels for a living, before I realized it or discovered that it was something I could do, I definitely felt like, authors exist on this other plane. They're somehow, better than other people. And now that I've become one and know a lot of them, I can assure everyone that is not true. We're often worse than everyone else. But
don't break the mystique, David. They're gonna pull your card.
Well, but you know what I'm saying. It's just it really exists on this kind of this other plane, and then once you start doing it, once you start seeing how it's done, it's just a thing that you try and do, and if everything goes well, then it comes together the way you want it to.
Let's get into the work a little bit. The first book was Conspiracy of Paper, right? I have that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so your love of history, your academic pursuits of historical and literature. So tell me a little bit, was it just a no-brainer that you were going to go into this genre of historical fiction because that's kind of where you had been academically working, and that was just where the inspiration struck for your first story? Or is it just a genre that always spoke to you? How did that first come about? Talk to me about the Lion of Judah. Where did that come from?
Well, so yeah, I've always been a pretty, I've always been pretty much all over the place as a reader. I don't stick to one genre. I've kind of come to recognize that there are certain things I really respond to in books that I read, and I like I think of myself as liking certain genres more than others, but I'm into like anything that grabs my attention and can hold it. And I had the desire to write a novel before I knew what I wanted to write about. So it really did begin with me saying, okay, it's time for me to take another shot at writing a novel. And so I spent some time thinking about what I wanted to spend time with, and what kind of story I had to tell, and what unique things I could bring to the medium that would make me stand out for a publisher. And I happen to know 18th century Britain really well. And I was writing a dissertation on the link between the origins of the English novel and the shift in how people were thinking about money. And that's what I'd spent years working on. And I thought, there might be some way to turn this into a novel, that all this information could serve as background for, some kind of, interesting protagonist and interesting story. And so that's really where it came from, is me thinking about this material and trying to use it as background for a story that I would want to read.
Yeah. And what I love about your first book and all the books after that, they convey such a sense of time and place. You absolutely excel at that. And from the very first book, and talk to me a little bit about Benjamin Weaver as a character. Benjamin Weaver, I don't, to this day, I'm not sure how you made banking as adventurous as that book is. Like, if I look back at it and you try to describe it to somebody else, it's like, no, really, but this is so much fun and adventurous. To inject Benjamin Weaver into that, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to write about this major shift in finance that was happening in the first half of the 18th century. And I recognize that the number of people who think they want to read about changes in 18th century English finance, you can fit into a very small car. It's not something people think they want to know about. But I also recognize from my own experiences as a reader of historical fiction, one of the things I always really loved was seeing how things I sort of think of as commonplace and ordinary and almost without origin, seeing where they actually come from. And I thought that was my angle, right? That we have all of these mechanisms of finance that we engage with, things like stocks and bonds and lottery tickets and investment, and showing people where these things came from, and that it really was this. It was a huge cultural shift. It was a culture war of its moment, and infusing that with drama seemed like something that should be theoretically possible to do.
Yeah, and I believe you won the Edgar Award for first novel on that one, didn't you? If I remember right. Yeah, I'm so many people in this little corner of BookTube where we focus a lot on epic fantasy and sci-fi and horror. They reach for that palate cleanser book of historical fiction. Bernard Cornwell or Ken Follett, they have favorites that they go to. And I've already had some subscribers tell me after I announced you were coming on that they've picked up Conspiracy of Paper and they're just really enjoying the ride so far. And it's kind of opened up a whole new author for them. How many Benjamin Weaver books are there altogether at this point?
I'll answer that, but I just want to say one thing real quick in response to that, which is I really feel, always felt that historical fiction is fantasy fiction.
I completely agree. I just put Bernard Cornwell on my top 10 fantasy list.
That unless you're writing about like a period like the 1970s or something where there's all this, where we know exactly what was going on. If you're writing about a period before recorded media, then you have to do world building. You have to invent things. You have to fill in the gaps. You have to use your imagination to figure out at least what some aspects of life were like. And fantasy is, historical fiction is just like fantasy in that, except that you're world building based on very strict rules. Whereas in traditional fantasy, you might riff on history or aspects of history, but in historical fiction, you want to be as accurate as possible up until the point where nobody knows.
Yeah. You go ahead.
Yeah, to answer your question, there are, as of this moment, 3 full Benjamin Weaver novels and another book where he appears in flashback as a minor character.
Are you going to go back to Benjamin Weaver, or you put him on the shelf, you think?
I definitely put him on the shelf forever until recently when and I guess I'm announcing it here on your channel, that I am in fact working on a new Benjamin Weaver book.
Oh, that is exciting. Really?
Yeah, very early stages. I wrote a rough draft and then got notes for a book that I sold, and I'm working on that now. I'm revising it, and then going back to finish this Weaver book.
And what pulled you back?
I don't know. I just sort of recognized that saying no, I'm not going to write a Benjamin Weaver novel was something that I was just doing, and I hadn't really thought about whether or not I wanted to write one or not, so much as I'm a little bit of a curmudgeon, and people say, "Oh, you should do this." I kind of want to do the opposite.
As soon as you hear that, oh, people want that, nah, bah,
Yeah.
humbug, yeah.
But I was giving it some thought, and I remembered just how much I liked the period and how much I like writing the period and writing the characters, and spent some time just kind of with it in the back of my head, and came up with an idea that I really liked, and just kind of happened.
Oh, you've made me a happy man, David. You've made me a happy man. I'm sure a lot of other people as well.
That's nice to hear.
I love that you equivocate historical fiction to fantasy. I feel the same way, and it makes total sense to me, because I know we've spent hours, right? So much time talking about how much we love Babylon 5 and all these other things that we, that are important to us. So I know where your love is, and I know where you come from. So for you to kind of equivocate that as the same thing, it makes perfect sense to me. So I want to segue into some different type of your work that's further afield into the fantastical. And that's some of your comics work that I don't, maybe not a lot of crossover audience from historical fiction makes it to comics, or vice versa from comics. But there's some of your comics, there's a nice historical fiction feel to it. Talk to me about some of that. And I know you've done a lot of it to this point. I don't know if you're still actively doing comics or if you've taken a little bit of hiatus, but you've done quite a bit.
Yeah, so I got into comics because an editor at Marvel had read some of my books and thought this character you mentioned, Benjamin Weaver, he thought he was like a historical Luke Cage, was how he described it to me. And as a Marvel fan, I really kind of loved the comparison. And
you know what? Let me just stop, because the comparison is apt. You're dealing with the theme of otherness with Benjamin Weaver and Luke Cage of the time that was being written. Absolutely, there's parallels there. And the theme of other, I'm going to touch on later in some of your other work, but I just had to throw that in. Go on. I'm sorry for...
Yeah, no, I'd never thought of the comparison, but when he said it, I was like, yeah, no, I can see that. And so I started doing some work for Marvel, and some of the work I did for Marvel initially was historical. So one of the first things I did for them was a mini-series called Mystery Men, in which they wanted to set the origin of the Marvel Universe back a few years. So, as I'm sure you know, like the Marvel Universe begins in 1939 with Captain America and Human Torch and Namor, and characters like that. And they wanted something in the early 1930s and said, why don't you create a bunch of new characters? And this was one of the first things I did in comics, and I had no idea like what a cool opportunity this was. I was like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. Again, what a pinch me moment, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like you get to back up and recreate the birth of the Marvel universe. Like, go ahead and stand on Stan Lee's soldiers, back up a little bit and recreate. Like, I love Mystery Men. Everyone that is a comics fan, is a Marvel comics fan, absolutely should read it. I'm going to make sure we have the first Benjamin Weaver book and Mystery Men linked right below us. Click on it and check these out. So, I mean, tell me what that pinch me moment was like that you got to do that.
And it's just so nice to hear that you liked it. It's actually one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on. I loved how the story came together. I just think the art is amazing. It was such a cool collaborative project for me. I just had all of these really incredible meetings with my editor, this guy named Bill Roseman, who's just like this comics genius, in which we just brainstorm characters. And I sort of learned the Marvel method in these meetings. I'd pitch a character and he'd be like, no, that's not a Marvel character. A Marvel character has to have, these elements. And from there, I wrote a script for the first issue, and it was sent back as being terrible. And and that happened 3 more times. And
oh my God! So you did issue 1 four times or so before?
There were 3 completely different drafts before the draft that became issue number 1 was written, and the notes I got on why it wasn't working. It was dispiriting, and I was frustrated and annoyed. but at the same time, it was a masterclass in how to write comics because
yeah.
it was
I bet.
it was this guy Bill and his boss, who's this like Marvel legend named Tom Brevoort. And just getting notes from these guys on how I was just, completely botching the script was just so helpful. And I ended up putting together the script that in the end that they were happy with, and I was really happy with, and we got the ball rolling. And it's just an amazing experience. It's so different from writing a novel in which you're in isolation for a long time.
So collaborative. Collaborative. Yeah.
You send in a script and you get notes and you edit it and you send it back. And then a few weeks later you get inks, right? You get to see the drafts of the art. It's
and what is
incredible.
that like? Like what, I mean, to see that, like, take me through the first moment you see your first roughs, your first inks of stuff that you've written.
Yeah. Like you write a novel and when it goes out into the world, sure, it's got a cover. It's got cover art and it's a physical object, but it's essentially the thing that you created out there in the world. It's not collaborative in this way where somebody has to read your words and interpret them and is a co-creator, right? It's not like, oh, here is my script and you must do what I say. I learned pretty early that artists want to be co-creators and they don't want every detail directed to them so that they feel like they're just following orders. They want to be co-creators, and I think that's awesome. And just seeing my words turned into a story that's partly mine, but also partly the artist's is just really cool. And just sometimes I'll describe a character, I'll introduce a character, and the artist will come up with something that is literally, that not defying anything that's in the script, but just interpreting it in this way that I never would have imagined. And it's just so much more awesome than what I had imagined. And so I remember just like leafing through those first inks and just laughing out loud at just how great it was. Just like how the Patch Zurcher, the artist, had just surprised me. By what he ran with and what elements really stood out for him, that what he wanted to underscore with his art. It's a pretty fun experience.
I tell you, what I love about it is the reimagining of the birth of the Marvel Universe with never before seen characters, right? Like it completely opens the things up because it's completely new. It still has those David Mitchell themes that I love in every one of your pieces of work that I've read, which is it's got such a well thought out, engaging mystery as a plot device that pulls you all the way through and is unrelenting. And it has themes of otherness and how that is overblown. And when it resolves, we're all more alike than we think we are. And it has this amazing time and place, love of history, interesting research, and just to see all that in a comic was like this. It's a David Liss comic. It's what David Liss brings to his books, but it's in a comic, and it was the coolest thing. And for any Marvel lover, and I don't think this comic gets the play that it should get in the Marvel universe. And I remember after I read it, going to you say, "There's got to be a sequel. What if this and this and this?" I mean, I'm sure you remember. I just like spun out of control. It's like I can't believe they haven't come at you to do more in that time, in that universe, in that world.
Yeah, I mean, our editor really championed the idea of doing more, but the powers that be were not interested. So. Unfortunately, it's just the 5 issues. But it was a great project to learn with, and I feel like it came out really well. I loved doing it, and I'm happy it's still in print.
Yeah, and from there you went on to do quite a few other characters.
Yeah, I did Black Panther for a couple of years, and then I started writing titles with other publishers. Did a bunch of stuff with Dynamite, IDW, trying to remember who else, bunch of stuff. And then it just kind of petered out. I mean, that's sort of how the comic industry works, is there are people who spend their whole careers in it, and sometimes writers get brought in for a few years and
then
they're
cycled out.
replaced with some new blood. And that's sort of what happened to me. Excuse me.
Yeah. So you were replaced with the fresh new David Liss.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to take that the right way, I guess.
I realize in retrospect that the people who make a career of it were more committed to some of the secondary stuff than I could have been. People who go to, half dozen major cons a year and are constantly schmoozing. And I had little kids at the time. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Part of it. Yeah, being on Artist Row and meeting the fans and doing that.
And just maintaining visibility.
Sure. Let's talk for a second. Oh, that's the perfect segue for me, David, when you say you had little kids at the time. And I want to bring up something that maybe you weren't expecting me to bring up, but I want to bring up randoms.
Okay.
Because I think, if I'm correct, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think book one, wasn't that the book you gave me as an early?
Yeah, you read a very early draft of it.
I was an alpha or beta or somewhere early on, and it's like, it's got a little bit of The Last Starfighter. It's got a little bit of Ender's Game. It's one of those things that we were talking about. Like, if it catches you at the right age, you're initiated. You're in. You're done. It's that book that's gonna just hook you. It's just a gateway drug for the genre, and I just loved it. And when I was looking into your stuff, there's 3 of them now.
Yeah, I read a trilogy. And this is a series of books. I guess it's middle grade technically.
What would you say what's the perfect age? What would you say the perfect age is?
I would say, I think of them as all ages books, so that lots of adults read them.
Yeah.
And I wrote them to be like love letters to fandom, right? So it's about, the premise is that all of the science fiction we know and love, Star Trek, Star Wars, comics, movies, whatever, it's all influenced deliberately by what's actually out there in the galaxy. And my main character is a science fiction nerd and ends up going out into the galaxy. And the fact that he spent his whole life, watching science fiction shows and reading books and comics and playing video games, this becomes a superpower.
Right.
And so I saw it as being this book that would really appeal to science fiction nerds. And I was really shocked when I discovered a lot of kids were reading it who had, and it got them into those things. They weren't into it already.
It's so amazingly, I don't know if you planned this, but now nerds are on top. I mean, what a perfect time for that trilogy.
Yeah, it was. It really was. I guess at that moment when things were shifting and being a dork was suddenly cool.
Right.
Something I'd never anticipated.
No, absolutely not. We never saw it coming. Yeah.
And it was just really fun for me to, to not have to try and conceal what my influences were, but to write about them directly.
I remember you telling me that you had so much fun writing it, and it's so obvious on the page that it's just a party. It's just a David Liss party that everyone's invited to, and I was so.
And I wrote that first book in 6 weeks.
Right, I remember it just came out almost all at once.
Yeah, no, that's never going to happen again. But,
so books 2 and 3 weren't that easy.
No, I mean they were fun and they were as easy as writing a novel you can reasonably expect it to be, but they weren't 6 weeks of manic work easily.
Well, I'm going to link the first one below this interview again. And if you're a lifelong fan like we are, if you've got younger readers, I'm telling you, this is that perfect gateway drug for them. I remember, I don't know how much it changed from the version I read to what finally went into publishing, but I just adored it when the first time I read it.
Well, thank you. I think most of the characters and plot points are probably more or less what you read. When we sold it, my editor felt like it was more middle grade than young adult, and so I had to kind of youthen it up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't know, man. I connected with it. I like you. I think it's like kind of for all ages, but I do think it's that perfect gateway drug if you hit it just at the right time.
Yeah.
But for me at that time, like again, I remember reading it, and we weren't on top, as nerds, we weren't on top. But I remember he's like, "This is everything I love in one book," like it was just.
There is in fact one scene toward the end of the book that really that has your fingerprints all over it, because like you suggested how to resolve a particular plot point, or I think what it was you said that basically there was a moment that I'd set up without realizing that I'd set it up that I needed to pull the trigger on.
Yeah. And I remember exactly that moment. I remember saying, "Oh, you've earned it. Just do it. Just do it." Yeah. Yeah.
And you described it as a Karate Kid moment.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. You know what? We need more contact. You're making this is such a great night for me. You're just making me feel great. I don't know why we lost contact so many years ago. You didn't even know we had moved, and I apologize.
No, I didn't. Or maybe I had and forgot. But everybody's social skills disappeared with COVID. I mean, I feel like I'm still in lockdown. Mostly.
Yeah, same. I'm a horrible friend. Let me get to what I saw on the shelves of my local bookstore that I was like, "Oh my, this is a new book from David Liss," and I did not even know this was out. And let me tell you what excited me so much is that it was on the fantasy shelf. So it's like he's come all the way over. Like, I mean, I know, we already talked about historical fiction is in a lot of ways world building and fantasy, but you've come all the way over. And it's like, I had to buy this. I had to reach out. And when did what was the deciding factor for you to go? Because this is still very much historical fiction. Very, very much. It has everything that a David Liss book that I've come to expect from a David Liss book. It's got amazing research. It has an unbelievable time and place, that sense of time and place. All fully accurate. The character, everything, the dialogue, the characters puts you in a time and place succinctly and beautifully. But you've come all the way over now, and you've just, it's like what you hinted at a little bit in 12th Enchantment. You've pushed your chips all in. What did the story just come to you? Was it a decision you decided, I'm just going to go all in and see what happens?
So I've always been really interested in magic that was practiced by real people who believed what they were doing actually worked. And so I've always been interested in the Golden Dawn and figures like Aleister Crowley. And it's always been in the back of my mind to write a book about that period and those people. And so I decided that's what I would do. For me, books either usually begin with I'll have a very specific character and story in mind, or I'll have some kind of historical moment in mind. And this began as the historical moment. And so I just started doing research on these major occult figures of the late 19th century in England and the Golden Dawn, and what they did and what they believed and what their practices were. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to be doing a straight historical novel or if I wanted to make magic real. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted the magic to be real in some way.
Yeah.
But what I did not want to do is write. I don't like secret histories. I don't like the idea that magic has always worked, but people don't know it.
Right.
That's always sat ill with me. It's like saying, there are accountants, but people don't know that accountants exist. We must keep their existence a secret. If it's there, then it's just part of life.
Right.
So if I wanted to write about these late 19th century occultists and have magic work, then I needed to write an alternate history in which something had changed and now magic worked in a way that it hadn't before. Whereas maybe before this stuff would work around the margins, you could get yourself a little bit better luck when traveling, or maybe you could sort of get this person you're into also into you, but this stuff was very tenuous, and now suddenly it's really powerful. And so I had this idea that about 10 years before the novel starts, that this change had begun to take effect, and now it's rolling. magic is becoming something real, and all these supernatural elements are part of people's lives, but it's still new enough that lots of people don't quite believe it. They haven't come to accept it, either because they haven't seen it for themselves or because people are very good at dismissing things that they have seen for themselves and making things fit within the world they want to live in rather than the world that's there.
Right. And this time is so, the characters, and you have a lot of real life characters that were wrapped up in that occultist spiritualist time of that time and place, right? You have,
Yes.
Sir Conan Doyle and Aleister Crowley, and I mean the list gets pretty extensive of actual people.
Yeah, it's most of the figures, most of the major characters are not real historical figures. Aleister Crowley is a pretty major character in the book.
Yeah,
and he started out as he's not well regarded in general, and he really started out as a villain. But I was having such a good time writing him.
Yeah,
I thought it would be more fun to make him. He's still an asshole, but he's he's our asshole.
But he's our asshole. He's he's on the right side, and I love the character of Crowley. I just thought you nailed it so well, because the nihilism's there. He's going to do what he needs to do to be the occultist of his age, but there's some lines he won't cross, and there's a loyalty streak to him, and it's like,
and by all accounts he was really charming, and I thought that to lean on the kind of creepy or sinister or selfish aspects of him, and not underscore just how charismatic he really was, and how people did love being around him was foolish, because he just ended up being a much more fun character to write.
Yeah. Oh, I him as a character, all the characters I really loved, and a lot of the themes in this book. So many layers, and I've been reading a lot of epic fantasies, 7,000-8,000 pages long, and thematically, so many layers you got into such a small volume, and it's like right away you stake out territory that I know is important to you, that I've read in a lot of your other work, of that dividing line of other, and what stakes that out, either classism or race or religion, or what is human. It starts to go even deeper with what's kind of bleeding through when this magic is starting to actually take hold and become real. And there's such a beautiful parallel of those lines we draw between ourselves and the inciting incident in the book of what's happening, that people are trying to line up of what's human, what's not. And it's like, I found it just fascinating that you still had thematically these things that are so important to you in this romp.
I don't really think about themes in that way when I go out to tell a story, but things inevitably appear, and obviously my interests are going to show up in a book that I write. But in this book, the main character is one of the aspects of this universe is that people are undergoing these bizarre transformations, and some of them happen relatively quickly, and some of them happen slowly over time, and some of them are kind of weird, and some of them are just terrifying. And my main character is trying to keep a secret the fact that he is turning into a tree. Yeah. And it's something that's going to happen very slowly over years. But eventually he's going to just stop moving and grow roots and become completely inanimate. And that to me was just like this terrifying thing to live with. And there's a scene in that book that I really remember loving writing, and I would always be really interested when I had to, I revised my books a million times, and this was a scene that most of it, by the time you get to the end of a book, I'm just sick of all of it. But this scene always sort of captured my imagination, where he encounters someone who's at the late stages of this disease, who is really losing his ability to move at all, and is very close to just losing the ability to speak. And he's really content with with his lot, and that he just sees life differently
Yes.
now. That
Yes.
he's at the end of this transformation. He's not saying kill me or this is the worst thing. He's like, this is great. I love this.
Yeah.
And I was just really interested in this idea of these things that that are terrifying also being just beyond our ability to understand why maybe they're not terrifying.
Right. And I love that scene as well, the one you're describing. And I think for me, it struck home so much because and again, a David Liss book, there is a mystery here, and I'm not going to give spoilers to what that mystery is. But we gone all the way back to the beginning because it revolves around banking, and it revolves around exactly what's happening and how this is bleeding through into this world in a larger sense. But that scene, I found such a crux of the thing. This exactly as you described. He's almost transcending, becoming what our human, our minds are day to day, and getting ahead and doing this kind of thing. And it's really portrayed in the drudgery of capitalism is starting to remove some of humanity from ourselves, chasing these things. And then you have somebody that's at the late stages suffering of what this person is so afraid of. And it's almost like he's moved beyond that. So that line of others starts to shift again. Where exactly is the curse? Is it
right? I mean, as you say, the main character works as a clerk in a bank, and it's absolute drudgery. He has these endless days of just copying documents, and that's fully human. But somehow this guy who's just an enlightened tree is not.
Right. And then the parallels of the industrial and again, love the research. It speaks to me on so many different levels because we have the parallel of the Industrial Revolution, that we're going through as we're getting into modern banking, we're getting into factory floors, we're getting into things like that. And I'm finding myself in the late stages of the book. And the evil is, ooh, wow, that's, we would define that as evil. That plan is a bridge too far. And then you bring it back to a parallel of the Industrial Revolution of, well, you lose this many people year to year on a factory floor and no one cares. It's just progress.
Right.
And it's like, David, you did it again. You made it. You brought it home, my brother. You made it real. The fantastical, you made it so cogent and real. And I appreciated it so much.
Thank you. It's great to hear. But it is, I mean, like all these things are human nature. And, I really did think about like how if these abilities were in the world, how would they become commodified? How would they become wrapped up into capitalism? Because you can't just like say, oh, now we can perform these rituals and cast these spells. Therefore, capitalism will disappear and we'll no longer be exploiting the people and the things we can exploit. Of course, the same systems are going to colonize whatever new abilities and whatever new powers, whatever new reality becomes manifest. And we've seen that with technology. So why would it be any different with the occult powers?
Right. Magic is just science that we don't understand, right?
Exactly.
In that classical way. So if someone's able to harness it and understand it, it would absolutely, in that human nature, as you say, would be used in these ways. So much. And I know you already said you don't work in themes, but just in case anyone's out there and they've loved your historical fiction work, and maybe this is too far out there, I'm not sure about this. I want to throw another theme in there that, my time in the theater, absolutely love. The family drama. The family drama of this, all the way back to Ibsen and The Sins of the Father. Just so delightfully put in there. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, but it's a delightful family drama interwoven with this mystery that you're peeling the layers slowly through as you're going through the book. So don't be afraid if fantastical stuff is not your bag, because I'm telling you, this will be your bag. Absolutely. Talk to me about the importance of getting that in there as far as the characters go.
Characters are what make fiction work. It's not plot, it's not setting. Your story is only interesting in as much as the reader cares about what happens to your characters. And I personally like to write stories about characters who are trapped or in trouble, or whose lives are in this kind of precarious situation, and that's just very comfortable for me. It hooks my interest. So with this novel, when I began thinking about it, I liked the idea of having my character being part of this banking family.
Mm-hmm.
His family owns this successful bank, and his older brother is the sort of heir to running the bank. And my main character, and this is really where the book started to take off for me, is when I came up with this idea, is someone who was told at a very early age, basically, your job is to be a playboy. You get some money, just
stay out of the way.
Stay out of the way. You're like, we don't want you in the business. Just, we have all this money, enjoy it. Just, the bank's not your problem. And then shortly before the book begins, I think about 6 months before the book begins, the father has died, and it's a stipulation of his will that the main character has to go to work in the bank, and he has to start at the bottom as a clerk. And he basically is forced to do all of this work that he thought he was free of. Even though when he was younger, he'd wanted to be involved, and he was basically told, no, we don't want you involved in this. You're not, it's not for you. So he's kind of trapped in this situation where he has to work for his brother. He has to accept whatever his brother pays him. And he's essentially beholden to this kind of tyrannical older brother, who lords over him, and my character has no choice but to do what he's told, because otherwise he'll be penniless.
Yeah. And the lack of agency just seems to grow and grow as the book goes on, right?
Right.
But at the same time, he feels such a connection to his family and the mission of what this bank started out to be, which has somewhat lost its way from previous generations. And it's just, again, those lines of what is other capitalism, so many of the things that you oh man, you can just sink your hooks into, and you did it with this, and you made the world of magic so real. And it's like, what an achievement for me. This was I've read some amazing books this month, and this is a 5-star. It's right up there for book of the month. I haven't decided what it's going to be yet, but you are, I think, in a 3-way tie right now for me. This is so in the running, and I think it might be your favorite book I've read.
Oh, well, thank you. I like I said, I loved writing that book. It was, I guess it was the first book for adults I wrote after doing the Randoms trilogy, and it was a return to historical fiction. And it was just a very comfortable book to write. I was writing about material that I really loved, and that I'd been sitting on for, since I was a teenager, when I first started reading about the Golden Dawn. So it was very gratifying.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find this. And you know what? I might have shot myself in the foot here because I didn't bring my glasses up. And we have become of advanced age. But I got to tell you, man, love the prose. And I just love the prose in that it sets up such stylistically that time and place is set up by the prose. And particularly what I loved is the humor in the character descriptions. Every one of them, not only the main ones, but just like the peripheral players around, when you would take the time to describe. And I'm trying to find like when you start to describe Mr. Philpott here. Oh, I probably can't do it because of my eyeballs.
Suffice to say, it's hilarious, everyone.
It is hilarious. It is. Oh, I feel like I've let everybody down because I wanted to mark this and have my glasses. But in that way, like Dickens could completely draw a picture for you and make you chuckle, and that character just sticks in your head. You've got that gift. And I found myself laughing over characters that were just on and off the stage in no time at all. But you had a way of describing them that is so stylistically appealing for the time and place that this happens in. And it's just, I was so appreciative of it. And I feel horrible that I didn't mark that and I didn't bring my glasses. What a fail on my part.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was working on my first novel, I kept inserting jokes into the narrative because that's just because I like humor. That's just sort of like how I think about the world and how I write. And then I kept erasing them. I was like, no, this is serious historical fiction, no jokes. It shouldn't be funny. And eventually I decided that I'm not going to get anywhere if I can't write like myself. So I'm going to write this book in my voice, the way that makes sense for me. And when I sold it, my editor said that was one of the things that really appealed to him, is that most historical fiction is humorless, and that my book just had moments that made him laugh, that he liked the kind of witty asides or wry observations, and so it's something that I have since learned to lean into.
How long did it take you to get to that point?
I would say by my third book. First book is where you learn that you can write a novel. Second book is where you learn how to write a novel, because you've already used all of your best ideas in the first one. And if you don't want to just write the same book over again, you have to figure out how to tell a different story about different kinds of characters. And so my second book was a real struggle for me because I didn't want to write the same book all over again. And so I really had to figure out how to write something different.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to my third book, I was like, okay, I can handle this.
Okay. I'm going to try and do this, David, because I just can't not. Okay. Mr. Philpott's rather grayish lips gesture towards something not entirely unlike a smile, though not a human smile, not even a mammalian smile. It is the smile of a lizard or shark or some other cold-blooded thing. If a worm wished to learn the art of smiling, it could do worse than study the Philpott method. That is good shit, man. That is,
that's shit that is fun to write. That's all it is. It's just, I'm amusing myself.
For the rest, I mean, I'm telling, and I'm not saying Mr. Philpott's a main character that shows up time and time again, but never gonna forget him.
He has an ignominious exit, as I recall.
Yes, and that's no spoilers, but I mean, anytime he enters stage, I know I can picture exactly that character, and you do it time and time again, almost with every character that comes on the page. You have like that little twinkle in your eye, that little moment, and I so enjoyed it. I just so enjoyed it. It was a moment of levity, and I just thought it gave the whole book another layer.
Well, thank you again. It's great to hear. I'm doing the thing that I like to do, so it's nice to know that readers respond to it. Well,
let me. Of course, we're going to link this underneath as well. Did this have a hardcover? How behind the curve am I on this one, David?
No, that was a paperback original.
Okay, so I'm not too far behind on this.
No,
this is a kind of a new release.
Yeah, I think it's about 2 years now, maybe.
Oh God, that's behind the curve. 2 years. Okay, if you have not picked this up, this is an amazing read for all the reasons that we've gone over tonight and more. Please, if this is the genre you love, and if it's not the genre you love, if you love good, complex storytelling with some wonderful mystery elements that are going to pull you through and keep you up at night wondering what's about to happen next, this is a read for you. We're going to link all of your work, the beginning of Benjamin Weaver, the randoms, the mystery men for those comic lovers, this as well, right underneath the interview. And David Liss, you are a scholar and a gentleman, my friend. I cannot thank you enough for spending the time with me tonight.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's genuinely great to reconnect. And San Antonio misses you. I'm sure
Oh.
you're better off, but we're not.
Oh God! Yeah, you know what? I've been back one time, and it was that time of the year that is so hot. It's a time of the year that made me leave in the first place. Like that place is so hot, it's hard to even describe.
It's bad.
Yeah.
That time of year is described as April through November, I believe.
There is like almost one season there, and it's just hot. That's you can't even call it an unending summer. It's worse. It's just hot. It's just worse than that. Let me hit, and I know you've already made us all very happy, us Lion of Judah fans, us Benjamin Weaver fans, that you are getting back to that. What else is there anything else you can tease us with that's in the works that's coming up? Are we gonna return for more Mr. Thresher? Is there
There's no plans to do a sequel to that book. I do have as I mentioned, I'm revising a novel right now that's kind of like a contemporary light science fiction thriller mystery type book.
David?
And then
And this
it's back to
adult,
Benjamin Weaver.
this is your first adult sci-fi
Yeah, it's light sci-fi.
thriller sci-fi. When is this coming? And I know publishing is crazy, so it could be years.
I have a contract for the book. I'm revising it. Once I get the final manuscript in, then we'll get a publication date. So it'll probably be sometime in 25.
Okay, now we have reconnected. Let's stay reconnected. When this is coming out, will you please come back and tell us
Absolutely.
all about it?
I'll get you an advance copy, and we'll talk.
Okay, that will make me. I am going to look forward to that. That's going to be one of my top books for next year. I am so excited for you. I am so excited for you. You're like that kid in a candy store now. You're getting to branch out into all that stuff that from when we were kids that we dreamed about.
It's fun. And in terms of other stuff I'm doing a lot of work now in the video game industry. So I'm doing, instead of working in comics, I'm doing video game narrative design.
Okay. You just dropped this bomb on us at the end. Tell us what game have you already done some, or are there?
Yeah. So I guess the game that's out that I've had the biggest involvement in is a strategy game called Distant Worlds 2, which is a science fiction empire building 4X game that I did most of the writing for the base game, and I've been narrative designing all the post-release content, all the DLC. There's another strategy game called Alliance of the Sacred Sons that's coming out later this year that I worked on. I'm working on an RPG as well right now that's in very early stages of development.
Can you say what studio for the RPG?
It's a small studio. It's their first game, so it would not mean anything.
Okay.
And I've had the first game I worked on was and it was actually through Marvel that I started in video game. I did a game for Marvel called End Time Arena that I think has been discontinued, but it was a game in which I did everything. I did all the plotting. I did the missions. I did the barks. Which, let me tell you, until you've had to find like 5 different ways for something like 50 characters to say I'm moving or I'm shooting, that was pretty rough.
Yeah, to break the thesaurus out. Well, how did you find yourself into that? Was it just through working in comics that you?
My first editor at Marvel moved on to Marvel Games, and he offered me this assignment to work for this Marvel MOBA, and then from there, I guess it was a few years went by, and it was during COVID when I was sitting at home. I was like, I really liked working in gaming, and I just wrote to a bunch of studios and said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I've done. If you need somebody, let's talk. And a couple of them did, and I just got things rolling.
Wow. I had no idea. That is too cool, man. That is crazy cool. I love games. I haven't played any of the. I'm not a big strategy guy. I'm more like I like to spray and pray. I like to run in a room and it's like, kill everything and let God sort it out kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely a strategy gamer. You show me a map with hexes on it, and
no, that's too much. That's too much brain power for me, my friend. You're on a different level than me than that. Okay, can you? In 2025, I can't wait. I can't wait until you can let me know the title of this, and we will look forward to getting together. But let's stay connected even beyond that. I'm going to do my best not to be a much better friend.
Yeah, same. No, I'd love to stay in touch. We can talk about books. Clearly, you read a lot more than I do, which is not trivial because I read like 120 books a year. But
no, that's more than me.
I watched a couple of your episodes and I'm like, damn, he reads a lot.
I'm averaging somewhere between 6 and 7 a month, but it's like, I still don't think that's 120 a year. That's a lot.
Well, yeah, I guess I do it professionally. So
yeah. How do you find time to read though, when you're writing like that? Do you just really structure your day?
I do a lot of reading on the weekends and at night. And, yeah, I mean, I used to have more time for reading than before I was doing the video game work. I also count audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks while, driving around and exercising, and that also, that definitely pads the numbers.
That counts though. That counts. Audiobooks
count.
I'm not a channel that says they don't count. I absolutely. So what would you say your favorite book of the year is so far? We're a quarter in or so?
Oh, that's tough.
Doesn't have to be published this year. Just the book you've read this year that like really, this was a great read.
Can I have a moment to check my spreadsheet?
Sure. You keep a spreadsheet? That's so David.
How else do I know how many books I read?
Goodreads.
What have I read? Oh, you know what I've really been enjoying? You mentioned Bernard Cornwell. I've been reading his Saxon stories novels.
Oh, yes.
Those are really fun.
Uhtred, son of Uhtred. Yeah. Because my dad had no creativity.
I think those are probably, I would say, the books I've enjoyed most this year.
Have you read his Warlord?
I did not like that as much.
Oh,
there's something about his style where it almost feels like nonfiction at times.
He can fall into that, but I'll tell you, I'm such an Arthurian freak. I mean, T.H. White hit me, and I think at that perfect age where I watched Camelot on HBO with Richard Harris like 587 times.
I remember it was on.
Yeah. And it was on every time you turned on the TV pretty much, and I watched it every time.
And plus Excalibur was on as well. So.
John Borman's Excalibur. Watched that 587 times too. So, I mean, for me, I had to put that trilogy on my favorite fantasy list because, I mean, it's fantasy. It's straight. I mean, the magic system is the faith in what we believe and how we define what's around us through that faith. But between pagan and Christianity going at each other in this way, it's like I just absolutely loved it. I'll take that recommendation seriously and give it another whirl. If you didn't make it to books 2 and 3, that's when it really starts opening up in that way.
No, that makes sense because the Uhtred books don't really start to get good until after the first one as well.
I might check out those next. I haven't done those yet, but yeah. See, this is the good stuff, man. We will compare notes on reading and stuff through the year. That way we will be primed and ready when this mystery sci-fi thriller comes out in 2025.
That sounds good.
David, again, thank you so much for your talent and for your time.
My pleasure. It's, again, great to reconnect. Say hi to your family for me, and I look forward to talking more.
Same to you, my friend.